Hey everyone, you're listening to InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. We're chatting about how to get the most out of life.
And covering a ton of interesting topics.
So there's sure to be something.
For just about everyone. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, and welcome to InfoQuench. I'm your host, Jeff.
And I'm Amy, and this episode we're going to be talking about how to get happier by using the Swedish philosophy of Lagom.
Lagom.
Or Lagom.
Lagom.
I'm trying to say it with a Swedish accent, but I'm not going to be successful in that.
It's really interesting that Sweden has a philosophy on how to stay happy. Is that what you said?
Well, we're going to get into what the whole philosophy is all about. And I will start with a quote because I love quotes and I like to incorporate one into every episode. This one is by a monk, writer, social activist, among other things. His name is Thomas Merton. And the quote is, "Happiness is not a matter of intensity, but of balance, order, rhythm, and harmony."
That makes sense.
And we'll see how it fits into this philosophy as we move through the podcast episode.
It's a lot more cheery than what I've heard. Like, you know, the Beatles always said happiness is a warm gun. I don't know about that one. But
What?
No, the song Happiness is a Warm Gun. You never heard that song?
No, I haven't. It
Yeah.
doesn't sound very Beatle-y.
They made some very, very abrasive and weird songs. But,
You know what else is abrasive? Jeff recently threw his back out.
oh, did I ever? Yeah.
It was quite a thing. He was fully laid out for a good week.
For a full week, yeah. I was taking the groceries out of the back of our Subaru, and I had too heavy a bag, and I was twisted sideways, and that's all it took.
I know. I think at our age, sometimes you just look or even think the wrong way, and we throw out our backs. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, he is recovered, and summer's wrapping up a bit, so we're getting back into the groove. Hope to have more episodes coming at you throughout the fall than we have over the last little bit, and yeah, getting
Life
back
just
into
gets
routine.
busy, man, and we'll get back to it.
Some other cool updates. Marc Maron.
Yes.
Let's talk about the little shout out he gave to you, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, I kind of know from chatting with him in the past that he doesn't really appreciate the band Fish, and he was playing his guitar in his home.
We should say that this is on Instagram Live.
And this is on Instagram Live.
This isn't Jeff sitting in Marc Maron's garage
and
chatting with him.
Amy was the one that got me into following him because I kind of gave him a chance. I just find him he's too much of a jerk for me to really truly like. Like he'll just dig into somebody for no reason whatsoever. And
That's kind of his thing, though.
I know, but it's like it's so uncalled for sometimes. Like I can't jive with it. I really can't. He just seems way too abrasive. Anyway, I was obviously pushing his buttons, and he was asking people what he should play, and I said, "Oh, play some Fish," and he's like, "Not a chance," and he swore at me. Jeff McLennan or whatever.
You could see he squinted into the screen so he could read the name.
So anyway, that was funny.
That was a nice shout out. Thanks, Marc Maron.
Marc Maron
shouting out to Jeff with the 4-letter word involved.
Is the only person I think, honestly, that I know that doesn't like me, and he's never met me. He just doesn't like me. Yeah, and that's okay.
There is nobody else in this world who doesn't like you.
It's kind of mutual, though. It's kind of mutual. I don't like him. Yeah.
Are you going to stop watching his Facebook Lives now?
Oh, yeah, I have. I actually saw one just came up in my Instagram feed or whatever, and he was in Brooklyn, where we went to see Yola Tango.
Okay.
At the, what was the name of that place? King's Theater in Brooklyn. He saw Pavement.
Okay.
He was all by his lonesome up there like a king looking down in the balcony
Well,
just
weren't
him.
we in the balcony?
No, I mean
we were in the nosebleed section.
I mean one of those like individual like one person balcony
the boxes.
seats. Yeah, the boxes, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I gotcha. So I want to bring up a little I told you so moment because I just love this one. Whenever Jeff puts something on our stovetop, He just randomly will throw things on the stovetop. Like it could be a newspaper, a dish towel, whatever. And I always move it off. And you're always like, why? What are the chances it's not turned on? It can't be turned on easily. The burners are cool. Don't worry about it. So then we were watching an episode of Somebody Feed Phil, which is one of our new Netflix binge shows. If you haven't checked it out, check out Somebody Feed Phil. It's pretty good. And Phil references just very quickly in some background story that a friend of his put a dish towel on her stovetop and burnt down her entire house.
Really? I missed that. There must have been one I didn't watch.
What?
I don't believe you.
I thought you...
I believe you.
Oh, okay.
Especially if you just put it on top of the stove and then leave the house. That would be
Well,
really
I mean,
bad.
if the burner's hot, you can just go in the other room and it could go up in flames pretty quickly. So people don't put stuff on the top of your stove unless it's a pot or a thing that's meant to cook with.
I wonder if there's a dish towel on the stove right now.
There is not. There is not. I did a scan before we started recording.
I know.
I don't
how
want to
your
burn
brain
down our
works.
house. Unlike you, want to burn down our house. Yes, Somebody Feed Phil is actually by the writer, creator of Somebody Loves Raymond.
I think he produced it,
Phil Rosenthal. I think he did everything around it. I can't think of all the credits, but pretty much everything that had to do with that sitcom, it was all Phil. So check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back into Lagom.
Lagom.
So Lagom is essentially, think of Goldilocks. You know when she tries out the beds and one's too soft and one's too hard and one's
Yes.
just right. The whole concept is just the right amount, just enough is all you need. That too much of anything is not necessarily better. And that's the whole idea. It's a lifestyle rooted in balance, which is why my quote focused on balance.
We talked about it briefly in the car on the way to Miss Peck, and I was saying that, but it's a great idea, the whole balance of life, but it seems like people just naturally go for more.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I read a few different articles about this. One of the main articles I'll just make mention of because I did draw a lot of content from it. It's an article by a philosophy teacher who teaches at Oxford. His name is Johnny Thompson. So he wrote an article on Lagom, and it's on the website Big Think. So if you want to check it out in a little bit more detail. But he gives examples of how people do just that, how they want more of something. So, for instance, people are out drinking, and they all just want one more drink or stay out for one more hour.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's closing time, and every bar is playing the song Closing Time.
Closing time.
I won't lie, I've been in the bar in my 20s when the lights come on and you don't want the night to end. But also another example would be you're eating great food and you're full. But then all of a sudden you just have those few extra bites. You try to have a little bit more of that good thing, and then now you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or, you really love clothing. And you just keep buying and buying to the point that you have so much clothing that there's no way you could possibly ever wear it and enjoy it all, but you just go to and access.
Yep.
So this idea that humans have this unquenchable thirst, insatiable appetite, it's something that's found in a lot of ancient religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism. They talk about this idea that humans are drawn to excess. So Swedish philosophy of Lagom is based on that age-old wisdom and focusing on finding contentment in just being satisfied.
But it's interesting, though, because what satisfies one person in their life may actually represent more to another person. So it's a personal thing, really. It's a personal philosophy, not one that is like universal for every person.
Well, I think the idea of implementing the philosophy can be universal, but the level that's required to reach satisfaction is
Right.
unique to the individual.
Yes, that makes sense.
So, for instance, for one person, they might be able to eat more of the pie.
Yeah.
If we're going to use food as a literal example. But it's still the idea of not doing something to access whatever your personal level of satisfaction may be.
So what if a person finds himself in a situation where they already have too much? So they want to go backwards with what they own, for example. Then they sort of get into the realm of minimalism, right?
Yes.
Because they kind of move away from having too much or even just enough.
Well, yes, and some people will go to extremes where they basically get rid of all possessions, but again, not going to the extreme of too little is also part of Lagom. It's not too much
Right.
or too little.
It's the exact happy medium.
But if you do already find yourself in a place of an extreme of possessions, check out our earlier episodes on KonMari, where we go through the entire KonMari method. And it was very early episodes, so you have to scroll back in the catalog. And I think it's single-digit episodes, so
It was an
check
old
those
one.
out. It was when the KonMari craze, I think, was just starting. It was, well, even before it hit Netflix, I had read the book and drank the Kool-Aid and
That's
was
right.
fully on board. It's a great concept, and it's an idea too of having only things in your life that bring joy. So when
We've discovered that KonMari is something that needs to be constantly kept up if it's going to be effective. And we do, but like not to the extreme that we did when we first took on KonMari.
Oh, yes.
You know.
I think you definitely have to. It's like anything. You can backslide in the effort that you made, and you have to keep at it. So back to this philosophy. It also looks at the fact that wellness is having a balance among the different aspects of your life. So when we look at our work, our career, our family, our friends, our health, are we providing a sort of a balance amongst all those things, or are we very, very focused in access toward one, aspect of our life to the point that other aspects are suffering?
Right. You got to have that equal balance with all.
Exactly. And I think a key aspect when you're looking at this idea of balance and just enough is money.
Money, yeah.
You look around finances. So I'm going to go through a few ways that you can incorporate the philosophy of Lagom in your life in a practical way to find balance and to make sure that you can be content with where you're at, what you have. And money is definitely a good example. I remember a study a few years ago where there was a certain level, an income level, that once you're there, then anything beyond that did not increase your level of happiness. And of course that varies depending on where you're listening at, if you're different areas of the world and the cost of living. So the idea was that if you have enough money for a roof over your head, that you have food on your plate, that you have a certain level of comfort to the point where you don't actually have to worry about your finances, that is where you need to be to find the ultimate level of happiness that you can achieve in a financial realm.
Right.
And anything beyond that is not necessarily going to increase your happiness.
Right. It's interesting, right? Because you could have people who have the philosophy that, let's say, for example, they do have a lot of money. So they're spending much, much more money than someone who doesn't really have that much money and wants to find their happy medium. It's hard to kind of gauge where the happiness is, especially when it comes to money, because there are people who want to just spend every cent that they make. A lot of people want to put money away for a rainy day or whatever, for retirement and stuff like that, and that makes sense to a lot of people. But to other people, it's like, spend it. That's what makes us happy. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. So is it a matter of having the comfort and security of having money put away, like you said, so that you aren't worrying about your financial situation? Or is it putting it into material possessions that can be in excess of what you can actually afford?
Yeah.
So it is interesting. I mean, you and I are very much...
we don't really, spend a lot of money on things we don't need a lot.
No, and I think for me, a happy financial position was reached when I didn't have to worry about finances.
Not including records.
Not including records. But just not having to worry about, the next bill. And not everybody has that luxury. But that's certainly, once you get to that point in terms of balance, it can certainly help in your overall contentment in life. But there are, as you said, there's a lot of people who just will never get to that point, regardless if they increase their salary.
Exactly.
Then all of a sudden they have to have...
They have to have more. They have to have that sports
bigger
car,
house.
A bigger house, a sports car, whatever.
I think it really is a matter of individual taste, whether or not how much you want to put away versus how much you want to spend today. And I think a balance between those two things are important as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I also want to recognize that there are so many people that will spend a lifetime in a position of not being able to put money away. And,
right, exactly.
And that's certainly the case too. So money is just one example, and it's different for everybody. Everybody's in a unique circumstance with that, and they need to figure out what is right for them. When we talk about, for instance, houses, A lot of times people are always striving for bigger space, more land, more home. And you and I have come to the realization quite quickly that having a bigger house is not something that we want.
No, you see these like Hollywood stars, and it's just them and their wife, maybe a couple kids, and they've got mansions with like 30 bathrooms. Like, who needs that? That is, to me, is ridiculous excess.
Well, and to have a house so large that many of the rooms you wouldn't even go into on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know, or how would you find things? Sometimes I can't find my phone in our house. How would I find it in a mansion?
How would you find people? Like, if you'd have to have walkie-talkies.
I'd be like, Jeff, call my phone, and
Yeah.
we'd have to run around the house to try to hear it ringing.
Which wing of the house are you in? Like, that's just not, I mean, it's
They must have PA systems, because I can't imagine that
Why
like the
is it?
Kardashians are walking around with walkie-talkies. They must have a PA system through their mansions.
Why is it that people really feel like they need to have a home that large?
It's
though?
for show,
It's
though.
status. It's
It's
exactly
all-
status. It's exactly like, look at me. Look at me.
Well, and then to have a home that big, you have to furnish a home that big with a bunch of things that you don't need. You have to heat that home and
Yeah.
create a carbon footprint that's far larger than you need to create and impact the environment.
You got to put a tennis court in there so you can learn tennis.
Well, that's right. And then there's a swimming pool, Jeff. We got to have the swimming
And
pool.
you got to learn to swim.
Well, we need 6 swimming pools. One's not enough.
That's right. One for every person in the family.
And what is with all these bathrooms?
I don't get it. I don't know. I know we watched that House Hunters International show, and there's this like simple couples, and they're like, "Oh well, we could never share a bathroom. That's just ridiculous. Like we're gonna have to scratch this one off. I can't use the same bathroom as you."
I know
like,
we
what?
share a bed, but we will not share a bathroom.
Or they won't like to take the house because it doesn't have 2 sinks in one bathroom. I'm like, what? Who are you people? Who are you
Although
people?
there was one morning, what was it? It was the other day. The 3 of us all had to. We were all at the bathroom sink at once, and you're like, "Oh, thank goodness we don't all get ready at the same time in the morning."
Yeah, that's right. I was alluding to that.
But I mean, really, if you think about the 2 sinks, why is that needed? Why can't you just organize your morning so that you don't have to brush your teeth at the exact same time? Is
Yeah, I know.
that a hard thing to do?
I know. Exactly.
Like, how long are you spending brushing your teeth and in front of the bathroom mirror?
2 sinks makes sense. It's kind of nice, but is it essential? Is it needed? Is it something that everybody should have? No.
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 I agree. I was listening to a podcast. Jay Shetty has a great podcast. He wrote an awesome book called Think Like a Monk. If you haven't read it, check it out. I loved it. And so when I heard he had a podcast, I had to check that one out too. Life on Purpose is the name of it. But he was interviewing Megan Trainor. Do you know who she is?
You told me.
She's a
when you were
singer,
watching this.
and she
all
sings.
about that bass.
That's her. She's all
Yeah.
about that bass. And it was really interesting because she said that they had her and her husband bought a home, and she was talking about how close they are. And she said there was a toilet and a bidet. And when they were looking at the home, her husband said, "Well, we don't need a bidet. We don't use one." So they asked the plumber just to put in another toilet so that they can both use the toilet at the same time. Because I'm not
Yikes.
making this up.
That's pretty
But she
close.
said
When
they
you
would-
said they were close.
Well, she said what would happen is in the middle of the night, she would wake up to use the bathroom, and she would wake him up. And then by the time when she woke him up, then all of a sudden he realized he had to go to the bathroom. Now, she's very specific that it was only number 1 and not number 2. But then I'm like, she's so rich. Why couldn't they? Like, there's a couple that if they're peeing at the same time, they could have 2 separate bathrooms. They don't have to be side by side. But I just picture 2 people sitting on a toilet holding hands.
Even one-hit wonders can become rich. I mean, at least I shouldn't assume that she's a one-hit wonder. I don't know any other hits of
No,
hers,
she
so.
actually has recorded quite a bit, and she's
okay.
releasing another album just this fall, I believe.
Sorry, Megan. I didn't know that.
She was actually really fascinating. I was, skeptical when I saw her as being the guest on the podcast, but she's a fascinating woman.
Well, that's great. I'll have to listen to it.
Yes. Yes, you will. But we're not buying 2 toilets side by side.
But you know what? Like, let's talk about, seriously talk about getting a bidet. Like, I like them.
What was
They
that?
work.
There's like this famous scene in Crocodile Dundee where he basically tries to put his boot in the bidet, and he's trying to figure out what a bidet is all about.
Oh, yeah.
So we record our podcast out of North America for those who are listening from elsewhere, and bidets aren't quite as common in Canada as they are in other parts of the world.
But you can outfit a regular toilet, with a bidet pretty easily, I think.
Well, that's right. You can get a whole attachment kit from Costco, and there you go. And maybe you save on the toilet tissue, and there you go, clean as a whistle. I don't know where we got to talk about balance and Lagom and just the right amount.
Let's get a bidet.
So when we talk about Lagom, there's actually two separate strands of it. The first kind is just around social awareness, and it's the idea that what we do affects other people. So when we think about when there are, say, cookies on a plate and we decide to take, all 3 of them, well, that means that there isn't anything left for anybody else.
I think that we as Canadians always tend to be that one person that doesn't take the last cookie.
You're
That's
right.
what we do.
We always leave a little bit of something. But didn't
Why,
you say in
though?
Asian cultures, if you eat everything on your plate,
Yeah,
they
they
come
bring
back
you
more?
Yeah, they do that with alcohol as well, which is dangerous.
Right. So you have to leave a little
have to
bit
leave
to
a
say
little bit.
that you are full, that
Yeah.
you're satisfied.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if there's other parts of the world that do the Canadian thing of leaving it. We'll basically leave like one chip in a bowl, so we're not the last person to have finished
It's
it.
very true. And it'll eventually get to this little awkward moment where at least one of us Canadians will say, "Is anyone going to eat that last chip? Because if not, I'll eat it." And then they eat it.
So just, the idea of sharing, if we try to do things in excess, we're not leaving enough for our fellow humans. If we're in line, being patient, realizing there's people in front of us and people behind us and that we're not more important.
That's a wonderful philosophy to implement with all of your life, everything about it.
And then the second idea is the second strand of Lagom is just that mental shift about contentment and satisfaction, which is really where I spent the greater part of the episode. But bigger doesn't mean better. More in our bank doesn't mean we have more status. Access doesn't mean we're necessarily more happy. There are a lot of rich people who are miserable. There are a lot of people with a lot of what we would think are very awesome possessions who are in their mind trying to figure out how they're going to hold on to them because they have to keep making a certain amount of money to pay the mortgage on the huge house, to make the car payment, to do all of those things because they've gone above and beyond thinking that was what they needed for their own happiness when they ended up in a situation where it becomes a struggle to maintain just that lifestyle.
Yeah, that's that's very true. I love the idea of not going in excess. I don't think we've ever really been those people that really went in excess with certain things. Well, with records and stuff. But you know what? I have these records, so I don't have to go to a psychiatrist. Music is my drug.
Yeah, it's your drug of choice.
Yeah, my drug of choice.
Anyway, I find it funny that I haven't brought up records a single time this episode. You've brought them up twice. I feel like there's a little bit of guilt in your excess of records.
No guilt, really. I just figured, why break the streak?
You always say, at least it's not heroin.
At least it's not heroin.
Don't come home with heroin.
I very
because
rarely
then
buy a
that won't
record
work.
now. Very rarely. Anyway, let's not talk about records.
Other things not to do to excess would be exercise. It's important to keep moving, to be healthy, to be active, but we don't need to burn ourselves out to be healthy. And when we do exercise to excess, we can be, basically faced with chronic exhaustion, overuse injuries, trouble sleeping. Our immune system can be affected. So the idea is that you can just make sure that you're regularly active doing things that you enjoy and that you don't need to do it excessively so. Taking a hike in the woods for solitude, personal reflection, going to a yoga class for mindfulness, going for a swim with family and friends. You can sort of combine different aspects of your life to find that balance and also get active.
That's one thing that I'm focusing on more now with my life, is getting more active, which is good. After a back injury, it's nice to get back to it.
Well, the older we get, the more important it is to keep moving before we have to stop moving.
That's right.
That was a depressing way to
Keep
put
going. No, it's good. Makes sense.
Another great way to look at the idea of not going to excess in our lifestyle is that we're contributing to sustainability of helping our environment. You know, when we do these things, when we consume too much, whether it be possessions, food, all of those things have impacts on the environment. So it's that idea of balance. And I think even when you go to, you know, your garden, you don't take everything out. You don't pick everything at once. You leave a little. You know, that's all part of letting nature recover. Mm-hmm. And if we just deplete everything, then we're left with nothing. And with that, I'm going to move into Jeff's random tip of the episode.
It's time for Jeff's random tip. Random tip number 456.
One random tip I'll give you, Jeff. Before you go into your random tips.
Please, by all means.
Let me hijack
my random tip.
Here's a random tip. When you have one suitcase with all of your clothing in it, and you're, you know, going away to a cottage for the weekend, and you have a wet towel, don't put the wet towel on top of all the clothing in the open suitcase. That's a tip, Jeff.
That's a good one. Now here's mine. Mine is... Okay, so say you're a voracious reader and you're like really into like, you know, really understanding your books. You know, you really want to kind of get a grasp on character development, for example. Say, like, basically you're studying literature, for example, at university. Well, what you can do is if you have old clothing, you can, like, say you have an orange shirt, right? You can cut it. You can cut little bookmarks that are all orange out of that shirt. And then all the orange bookmarks that you put these little pieces of cloth in your book to show where those great quotes are. Then you got a blue shirt. So you got a blue shirt, you don't need it anymore. You cut it into little strips, little bookmarks, little tiny little bookmarks. And then those represent something else about the book. Maybe setting, whatever it is that you wanted to hearken back to. So they're all color coded, and you can go back and you can find out what you need to in your book.
That's really fascinating. Could you also use different colors of construction paper rather than cloth?
Yeah, but cloth is nice. It's kind of like, you could use construction paper, but it's kind of boring and get all bent and stuff.
But cloth is floppy.
That's okay. You can see it.
Yeah.
It'll stick out the top of the book.
It'll like flop out of the top of the book, though.
No,
and I feel like it would be messy in the bookcase looking.
No, it would look cool. I think you don't have to make it too much higher than the actual book. You don't have to like make them like bunny ears.
I love this tip, Jeff.
Thanks.
It's great. Yeah. I don't know if this is aesthetically pleasing on the bookshelf, but you know what? When you use the word voracious, I will just admit that recently I said ferocious, and I was corrected. And
was I right and you wrong?
Yes. Oh. But you weren't the one who corrected me. I'm always appreciative when someone corrects me when I use a word in the wrong. Oftentimes I'll read the word and realize I've never said it. And then when you say it out loud, and I want someone to correct me. I'm in my 40s. I've already gone 40 years using the wrong word or saying it the wrong way. I don't want to go another 40. So, you know,
one of your big things
everybody correct me when they need to. But to me, ferocious sounded better because I'm like, you're ferocious with your reading. Yeah. And I was using it actually in the context of reading books.
One of the things that you do, though, is you go on Google and you find the right pronunciation for words that you don't.
Well, I do once I realize I'm actually saying them wrong. But sometimes I feel like the word should be said differently.
Sometimes you don't know, though. You did that with the author that you wanted to know. What's the name of that author? Do you remember?
Oh, well, you mean for this quote?
Oh, was it for this quote? Okay.
Well, this one was Thomas Merton. That one seemed pretty...
No, it was another one. It was like the Buddhist book you're reading.
I can't remember.
Oh, well,
that fast.
I mean, but
what a test that was.
It's a good way to remember, though, is to look it up.
He's a Vietnamese monk.
Right.
I'm just reading doing some reading, beefing up on my Buddhism, and reading a book by him, and realizing I've seen his name written so many times and didn't really know how to say it.
Yeah.
But yes, there you go. Okay, with that all said and my mispronunciation of words, let me just wrap up this episode and say that follow that Swedish philosophy of Lagom and realize that more is not necessarily better. We can be content with what we have. We can be like Goldilocks and just have enough.
That's right. Just have enough.
Sometimes enough is just enough.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to check out past episodes and subscribe to keep up with what's new.
You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, and why not leave a review?
You can also follow InfoQuench on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Till next time.